Hey, everybody. This is my conversation with Peter Bogdanovich. There's so much to say about this filmmaker. There's not enough time to do it, frankly, nor was there enough time to talk to him about even a fraction of the amount of things I wanted to talk to Peter Bogdanovich about. But I was just grateful and happy to be there. I felt at ease with him. He was very nice, very warm, and very present. So it was a great time. You know, of course, most people know him from his breakout feature, The Last Picture Show. He had been already working for Roger Corman, who was a Filmwax radio guest some time ago. But Peter Bogdanovich quickly caught on. He was just a natural storyteller, and he made The Last Picture Show and then went on to make Paper Moon, which is one of my favorite films as well. And I should mention that I saw that when it came out in theaters with my parents. I was a very young kid, but I have very, very specific memories of seeing that movie and what an impact it had on me. To cut to the quick here, right now the Quad Cinema in Manhattan is doing two things. Well, three, actually. One is a retrospective of the works of Peter Bogdanovich. It's currently going on. They're showing almost all of his features, as far as I can tell, going back to Targets, which was his first feature that he directed for Roger Corman. And again, most of his output. It's going on right now. You can go to quadcinema.com to get the complete calendar. Also going on there is the release on tomorrow, Friday, the 5th of October, of Bogdanovich's latest film. It's a documentary about one of his heroes, Buster Keaton. It's called The Great Buster, A Celebration. I saw it. It's wonderful. It's just some great, beautiful footage of Buster Keaton at the height of his powers. A lot of it's restored stuff, and also the story itself has ups and downs, as did Buster Keaton's life, and Peter Bogdanovich presents it all there, and it's very watchable and very enjoyable. So that starts its theatrical run. If that weren't enough, the Quad Cinema is also presenting a retrospective of the works of Buster Keaton. And these are all things we discuss in this upcoming conversation we're going to play in just a moment. I'm making an effort to get this up and out because of the fact that The Great Buster is opening on Friday, October 5th. And time is of the essence to help kind of promote all of the above. So all those things are happening at the Quad. Now, while that's going on, the New York Film Festival is right now still going on here in New York City. And believe it or not, one of the films that is screening at the New York Film Festival is Orson Welles' final film that was never finished and that had been languishing, legally and financially for decades, for 40 years. And it's finally coming out thanks to Netflix, who finally paid up. And Peter Bogdanovich is one of the three producers who were responsible for finishing the film, editing it and getting it done. Again, thanks to Netflix, where the film will premiere on November 2nd of this year. It will also have a limited theatrical. But there's one more screening if you're in New York or in the New York area, and you can make it, and I believe tickets are still available. You can see The Other Side of the Wind on the screen at the Alice Tully Hall as part of the New York Film Festival on Wednesday, October 10th at 3 p.m. I myself will be at that screening. And not only did Peter Bogdanovich co-produce this finalized version of The Other Side of the Wind, he's actually was in it back in the 70s when they shot it. So he is in it. And because they're doing an eligibility theatrical in New York and LA, which means that they do a theatrical week before the end of the calendar year so that the film could be considered for Oscar contention, there may be Oscar nominations for Orson Welles, for John Huston, who is the star of the film, and maybe even Peter Bogdanovich. So it's just a wonderful bunch of things going on right now, bringing this brilliant filmmaker back. And I just want to say a few more of his titles if you have not seen most of Peter Bogdanovich's output. But I mentioned The Last Picture Show and Paper Moon and Targets. But of course, What's Up Doc is a brilliant take on the screwball comedy from the 30s, something that Bogdanovich is so influenced by the films of Howard Hawks and all the other filmmakers of the time, the golden period of Hollywood. If you read any of his books, you know that he was a movie obsessive and a movie critic and a movie curator before he even became a well-known filmmaker in his own right. But in that retrospective, and most of it's kind of over, I think, although it is continuing, was They All Laughed, Saint Jack, what else? And At Long Last Love, and other films from the Bogdanovich oeuvre. Anyhow, this is it. One of the great moments of my podcast that I've ever had, sitting down with Peter Bogdanovich, a hero of mine. So here it goes, without any further delay. This is Peter Bogdanovich, the director of The Great Buster and the co-producer of The Other Side of the Wind, here on Filmwax Radio.
Buster Keaton is the essence of movies. A lot of my daring came from Keaton.
He was born to be a silent movie comedian.
By the time he was 4 years old, little Joe Frank Keaton had actually become a star in vaudeville, the youngest ever.
The man said I was a big comedian and I was going to get a big contract.
Buster finally gets his long-time wish fulfilled, and he starts to make his own feature films. He is one of the inventors of cinema.
It's magic.
A perfect storm follows. Buster is drinking too much. His marriage is falling apart.
He blamed himself. He just lost his heart there.
He could have been killed. He was feeling so down that he didn't care.
Everything he had achieved was forgotten.
For Keaton, cinema was important. It was jokes that worked because of the movie camera.
How he did that was superhuman. There were no tricks. He just did it.
It's amazing how timeless he is and how that type of physical comedy will never be unfunny. How many filmmakers can you say that about?
How you doing? How are you?
Tired.
Tired? Oh, yeah. My God, you have been doing so much.
Yeah.
You're so busy with so many things going on right now. I mean, that's...
A few things happening, yeah.
Popping over to Alice Tully Hall.
It never rains, but it pours. Department.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You have just... Well, we're going to primarily talk about The Great Buster, your new documentary about someone or other. And then also, it just happens to be right around the same time as the New York Film Festival's screenings of The Other Side of the Wind, which is incredible timing.
It all came down at the same time, didn't it? It's weird.
Yeah. Was that just coincidence?
Oh, yeah, and we didn't plan it this way.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And so it was Cohen, Charles Cohen, right? Who now I guess owns a good amount of the catalog of Buster Keaton.
The good Keaton, which is the stuff he made in the 1920s.
The stuff he owned, the stuff that he wrote, directed.
Well, he didn't own it, but
no.
Raymond Rohauer, who's passed away, sort of got him the copyrights back somehow or other. Uh-huh. They recopyrighted them or something in Buster's name, and I don't know how the hell they did it. But there's 19 shorts and 10 features. The best work he did.
Yeah, in the 20s primarily.
All in the 20s.
All in the 20s.
1920 to 1928.
Can I stop and just ask you one question while we're talking about this stuff? Because I've been reading all of your great... You brought them. I'm hoping you'll maybe even sign later, because I've been going crazy. I was trying to read as much as possible before I sat with you, but I had
a lot of me. I published 14 books already.
That's very true.
I don't know how I did that either.
Yeah, that's.
We watched Noises Off last night, and I swear to God, I don't know how the hell we did that picture.
You did it, yeah. I remember that, and I remember seeing that on Broadway.
Yeah, but me too.
And then I don't want to get off track because I have probably hundreds of questions for you, so I'm going to try my hardest to be focused as possible.
Okay.
Although I do want to say one other thing. It's such a great thing to finally sit down with Peter Bogdanovich. As I was reading Who the Devil Made It, which I love, I'm thinking a couple of things. One is, what I do on this podcast, which is sort of like an updated version of what you were doing. Now you're meeting with these legends and the people that really invented American cinema.
Yeah.
I'm kind of years later doing it, but I talked to a lot of filmmakers, you know. And so as I was reading it, I'm like, well, this is a much paler version of what you were accomplishing with these books.
Well, I had some pretty great people to talk to.
Yeah. I mean,
there aren't that many interesting people today as there were then.
I think you may be right.
It was the golden age, for God's sake.
Yeah. And for the one or two that I wasn't familiar with, I'm grateful. Like, I just didn't know Dwan. I didn't know his work. I mean, I knew a couple of his films, of course, but I didn't know him.
Yeah, he was a lovely guy, just a lovely guy, and a wonderful interview, I think.
Your affection comes through a lot in that one.
I loved him.
Yeah. But how the quick question I had about all that period where you were doing the interviews, primarily, I guess, in the 60s and 70s, or maybe a little earlier even. How did you see all those films? I mean, you're talking to Howard Hawks and in these interviews, and Ernst Lubitsch, and he was one of them, right?
No,
sorry.
He was the one I didn't meet because
of course I brought him.
He had died, but he's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Alan Dwan, Howard Hawks, Fritz Lang, probably maybe that's one I was thinking about. Leo McCarey, Joe von Sternberg, and how did you're able to talk about? I would say 90% of the films that came up in those interviews, and I'm just curious. I got to get an answer from you how you were able to see those films. Nowadays, it's easy to see a lot more than it was back in the 60s.
Probably, yeah.
How did you get access to all those films?
I don't know. I just kept looking, look through TV Guide every week and see what's playing. Mm-hmm. And in those days, they played movies on The Late Show and The Late Late Show.
Sure.
Instead of Stephen Colbert.
Yeah, right.
Whom I like, actually, but they had movies on CBS, and then there was the $1 Million Movie. There was a lot of older films. Television subsisted on the old golden age of Hollywood for a while.
Yeah, I was old enough to know that when I was a kid, that's what they played.
And so I saw a lot of them that way, and I went out of my way to look for films. I checked.
I just had an image
Q magazine every week. Q is gone now.
Part of that was part of.
It's part of New York.
New York magazine. Yeah. I was thinking because you were doing all these retrospectives or monographs, as you call them, for MoMA, maybe you just had access to these archives of they projected them for you, and I had
No.
You watched them like anybody else on TV.
I saw a lot of them on TV, and I did the Hawks retrospective because I wanted to see everything he ever made. I fell in love with his work, and I suggested to the Museum of Modern Art, I said, if I can get Paramount to pay for it, would you do a Hawks retrospective? Because Paramount was releasing Howard's most recent film, Hatari. And they said, sure. Mm-hmm. So Paramount paid for it. And paid me. It was the first money I made in the movie business. Mm-hmm. $250 a week.
Still sounds like
it was a lot of money for them, for me.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I bet.
And the same thing with Hitchcock. Universal paid for that one.
Oh, right.
They were releasing The Birds. The Orson Welles, nobody paid for that. That was the museum just wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm. So you didn't earn any?
$50.
Oh, $50 for your time.
But it led me to meet Orson Welles.
And then you, of course, published This is Orson Welles.
Yeah, that was years later.
Right. Now, the Quad, it's a very different time, I know, so I'm not comparing these things, but it's worth mentioning the Quad Cinema, which also happens to be owned by Charles Cohen,
right?
Is actually doing a retrospective of your work. I just want to mention it since...
They've been doing it, this week.
Okay. So it just started, right? You've been popping over to the Quad?
Yeah, I've been over there a few times, yeah.
People must be so thrilled to see you.
Well, a few of them that show up, yeah.
I'm giving you a doubtful look. I think probably a lot of people are showing up. You're a legend for a lot of movie lovers.
Oh.
Okay, no comment. Well, my parents took me to see Paper Moon. That was my first Peter Bogdanovich movie. As a kid, I mean, it was what came out in '73.
It came out in '73.
Yeah, so I was 10. And, that's what you did. You went to whatever movies your parents went to, and they loved your film. So I went, and other than being somewhat embarrassed by Madeline Kahn's breast reference, when she tries to warm up things with Tatum O'Neal's character, Addie, right? But I loved it, even as a 10-year-old.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah.
Kids like it because it's about a kid.
Yeah, right. And I thought about her performance, Tatum O'Neal's performance, and I actually thought she's sort of like a Buster Keaton, almost her performance. She has one primarily, other when she smiles on a rare occasion, she has this stone face, kind of grimace on her face most of the film. Again, we're talking about Paper Moon. And she's like, has that energy of a silent screen child actor. In that performance.
I hadn't thought of it.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting observation.
I just watched it again for like the umpteenth time the other night, so it started dawning on me that if she had a handle on her back, it would be
throw her around.
Yeah. So Cohen came to you, Charles Cohen, and he asked you to do some documentaries, right? This was the first? Is that
he asked me to do a couple, yeah, and we haven't decided whether we're going to do the other one. But
the one on Douglas Fairbanks?
Yeah, mm-hmm. I don't know if we haven't made a decision on that. But
okay.
But the Keaton I thought would be fun to do, and I loved Buster since I was a kid. I used to go to my father grew up with silent pictures. My father did, because he was about 20 years older than my mother. Mm-hmm. And so sound, when sound arrived, my father was 30. Mm-hmm. So he grew up with silent pictures and took me to the Museum of Modern Art when I was 5, 6, 7. Mm-hmm. Saw Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, Charlie Chaplin, Griffith's films, and it was great that he did that, because it gave me a kind of foundation in silent films, non-talking films, really. They weren't silent. There was always some kind of musical accompaniment. And that's the basis of the art, really, is telling stories visually. And the further we move away from the silent era, the worse films get. Because, if you look at this, study the films of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, almost all the great films of that period were made by people who started in the silent era, whether it was John Ford or Howard Hawks or Hitchcock or Lubitsch or any of the great filmmakers of the talking era, basically started in silent pictures. King Vidor. So many of them, all of them, really, all the good ones.
Cooker.
Yeah, George. No, George didn't start in
I thought he did. Okay.
No, he came in with sound because he was a theater director. And they brought theater directors out when sound came in because they figured they would know people should talk. Most of them were lousy directors, but George was the one good one. Mm-hmm.
That actually answered another question, because I was wondering if your love for silent films. I made an assumption based on your interviews and the way you talked about it that there was a drop off for you after Talkies, what they called Talkies which were what the entire period of film after silent films is.
Well, it starts in 1929. Mm-hmm. the talking era begins in 29, even though The Jazz Singer came out in 27.
Yeah,
but that was a part talkie.
Right.
All talking, all singing, all dancing didn't come in until 29. Mm-hmm. And the first few years were a little dicey, and then the silent film directors figured out what to do. And Lubitsch was the first one who really knew what to do right away. He made 5 musicals in the first 5 years of that sound.
Did Hitchcock, one of his early, because he started in the silent era.
Yeah, sure did.
Right, he has a bunch of films. Did he start, like his first, what, again, I'm going to refer to him as talkie, but was that also partly talk, wasn't it?
No, he did
which was,
Blackmail.
Blackmail. Mm-hmm.
Which was the first English sound picture.
Yeah.
And he directed it.
But most of it was not. There's still a very small amount of talking, right?
Really,
It was only a
no,
portion of it. It was throughout.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It wasn't an enormous amount, but it was a talking picture.
Mm-hmm. 1929 is kind of a hallmark, and also in the career of Buster Keaton too, right? Because is that the year?
Yes, that's 28 was his last year of independence.
Right, and he was talked into by his brother-in-law, who would become his brother-in-law, Shankar,
yeah,
to sign with MGM.
Yeah, that was a big mistake. He called it the biggest mistake of his life.
Yeah, because
he lost his freedom and his independence. He was an independent filmmaker, really. He did what he wanted. They did the scripts. There weren't any scripts, except for the general. They didn't have a script. Mm-hmm. They just, as he said, we'd come up with a good beginning, and then we'd come up with a good ending, and the middle took care of itself.
Yeah, which is remarkable considering how intricate the choreography and the of these films are.
Yeah,
that they mostly came from improvisation.
Yeah, making it up as they went along.
Yeah, that's pretty.
And it was
speaks to his brilliance.
It was verboten at Metro.
Right. What do you owe this decision? Was it pressure from this?
He trusted his brother-in-law, which was a mistake.
Yeah.
His brother. Well, I don't think anybody knew what would happen, but the brother-in-law must have known that they would be cutting off his independence.
So it was self-motivated for.
And the brother-in-law had a brother at MGM.
I see. So there was
Nick Shank.
Nick. So it's probably a financial.
Skank, actually.
Skank.
Yeah.
Unfortunate name, but that should have been a signal. Keaton had a beautiful name. Speaking of which, again, I apologize for popping all over the place, but I have 20 minutes is like ridiculous. I might have to stalk you or something. I may have to come and find another period of time to meet with you because I'm not going to get, as I said, even a tiny fraction of what I want to talk to you about. Do you think it's true, or it's just a part of the legend that Harry Houdini gave Keaton his nickname Buster?
Well, that's what his father said. Joe Keaton said it was Houdini. It's disputed in certain books and certain people say that it was another vaudevillian who did it.
Right.
But it was a name that nobody remembers. Mm-hmm. So I like to say it was Houdini because people at least remember the name.
Right. And it gives that right.
Somebody saw him fall down a flight of stairs at the age of 6 months or something.
And land on his feet, essentially.
Yeah. And that's some Buster your kid took there.
Yeah.
And Buster meant fall in those days.
But in terms of Skank, do you feel like... I guess his brother-in-law had a financial motive to sign, right? I'm sure he somehow probably benefited from bringing Keaton into MGM.
There was money there, yeah.
Does it speak to Buster's heart that he or his desire to, or his allegiance, his loyalty, that he was... Naivete.
I think, and also inexperience in a funny way with... He thought probably that the guy was... I don't think that Skank was trying to destroy him, but it just wasn't really very, very well thought out.
Yeah.
The move.
Right, because from then on, first of all, the Talkies were now, as you said before, started. That was one thing. He also... It just was a bad fit all around, and he was falling out of step.
It was a kind of a perfect storm.
What do you think? Conjecture is kind of a crazy thing to go focus on, but what do you think would have happened if he had stayed independent as the Talkies began?
I think he would have made better films, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Chaplin ignored the sound, ignored talking pictures, and the next two films he made were both silent pictures. Mm-hmm. City Lights and Modern Times have sound, music, and so on, and an occasional noise, but are not talkies. Mm-hmm. And they were very successful, by the way. Mm-hmm. In fact, there was a there was a noteworthy piece in Variety around that time that said that the attendance on talking pictures dropped off sharply and that it never reached the heights of silent pictures.
Mm-hmm. We should mention that the Great Buster, your documentary that we've been talking about, will be screening at the Quad Cinema as of tomorrow, Friday, October 5th.
It's the 5th, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And hopefully it'll be there for a while. I mean, people should rush out and see this. And at the same time, they're also doing a retrospective of Keaton starting the 5th and running through the 11th, I believe.
I heard that, yeah.
As well as your own retrospective of...
I don't know if they're continuing mine. Maybe they are, I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe they are, yeah.
It's going on for a little while. I don't think it's over. Is that what you're... No.
I just don't know.
The Other Side of the Wind, which... Let's just spend a minute or two on that before we're cut off.
The Other Side of the Wind, Orson Welles' last film.
Yeah, which had remained unfinished and for obviously legal...
About 40 years.
Sitting in one vault or another or under one person's care or another. And finally, I don't know, the Netflix finally decided to...
Netflix stepped up to the plate and put up some money. And we were able to finish it.
And you and Frank Marshall and...
Filip Rymsza
were able to
get the rights from various rights holders, and Netflix was Netflix was indispensable here because they put quite a bit of money up.
It just kept seeming like this was going to be it never happened, and then finally it just kind of came together.
Well, Orson had asked me. Sometime in the 70s, he said to me one day at lunch, he turned to me suddenly out of the blue and just said, if anything ever happens to me, I want you to promise me you'll finish the picture. And I said, oh, Orson, nothing's going to happen to you. Why do you say that? He said, I know nothing's going to happen, but if it does, I want you to promise me you'll finish the picture. I said, well, of course I will. But he said, okay, we can drop the subject. And, well, when he died in 1985, I figured I had to make good on that promise. It took me quite a while.
If not for the lack of trying, you would have finished it long ago.
Three regimes at Showtime, for example, agreed to do it. But the rights holders were just the various rights holders, and some people who stood up and said, we own this, and they didn't, but we had to prove it, you know. Mm-hmm. All that took forever. And it kept, the Showtime was ready to do it, but I mean, it worked out in the best way because Netflix put up quite a bit more money than Showtime would have.
Oh, great.
And so we were able to finish it. We even went over budget and they didn't complain.
They have a little extra discretionary funds available to Netflix. I think Netflix is going to be okay.
Yeah, they're not hurting.
November 2nd is when it's going to be premiering on Netflix, and also in select cities, I assume, for consideration. Is that? Believe it or not, this movie made in the 70s is now eligible for an Oscar because it's being shown in 2018 in Los Angeles and New York, at least. And since go ahead,
I'm just hoping that it would be nice to have posthumous nominations for John Huston and Orson.
Well, you yourself could be nominated, couldn't you, as a supporting actor?
Yeah.
Right? I haven't. They had a press screening at the New York Film Festival, and I was supposed to go. Had a conflict, but I thought, I'll go to see it even in a better spot. I'll see it in Alice Tully Hall on even a bigger screen if possible, with you in attendance. So, are you going to be next? How long are you staying in New York City?
Oh, gee, I think I leave on the 8th.
So you're here for a while. You have a spot here? Do you have a place?
No, I'm staying in hotels.
Okay.
I'm leaving on the 8th to go to Toronto, act in a movie for one day. I'm doing a cameo in It, Part 2.
Oh, okay. The horror film.
Yes, I never go to see horror films. I met the director, a very nice guy, Andy Muschietti. Uh-huh. And I said, I haven't seen your films because they're all horror films, and I hate horror films. Uh-huh. He said, well, I'd like you to be in this one. I said, well, then that means I'll have to see it.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Well, maybe not. Yeah, I'd probably do. Psycho, that's a horror film.
I hated it.
You didn't? Okay. I know that's not your favorite.
It was brilliantly made, but I hated it. I met Hitchcock a year later, and I said I didn't like it. It's the only film of his I don't like is Psycho.
What is his reason?
That's because you didn't understand the humor with which it was intended. I said, oh, really? Peggy, show Peter that, and they brought out this trailer. They showed me where Hitch was walking around, and, oh, terrible thing happened here, and so on. And the trailer was funny, but the movie wasn't.
What was your? Do you have a favorite Hitchcock? Since you brought it up?
I like a lot of Hitchcock's films. I think it's probably maybe his greatest film. In overall drama is Notorious with Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman.
Sure. But
I like North by Northwest and Rear Window, and I like a lot of his pictures. Shadow of a Doubt, and Strangers on a Train.
That's a great one.
I like a lot of his pictures.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from him.
I bet. Yeah. Well, it sounds like, if for those listening, the one thing I've been learning so much about you even, I think through your conversations with these directors who you so clearly have such great affection for, that are in the Who the Devil Made It, which I think is a part of a quote from, or taken from something that
Howard Hawks said. Yeah, I asked him, which films over the years have you liked best? Well, I liked almost any picture that made me know who the devil was making the picture, because the director's the storyteller and he ought to have his own way of telling it. That's a fair impression of Howard.
Your Hitchcock was uncanny.
No, it was.
I thought I did a good Hitchcock, but I'm sadly way worse than yours.
Hitch was funny. He said, I remember in the 60s, he said, most pictures today are just pictures of people talking. And now it's pictures of people getting blown up.
Right. I guess we'll wind it down. I was given a signal a few minutes ago. But again, rewatching Paper Moon the other night, I sort of got very emotional because I was really in the moment watching it. Because after you see something sometimes a bunch of times, there's a kind of a distance that's created because of the familiarity that you have, potentially anyway. But if you allow yourself to really connect with it again, the scene, one of the famous scenes where the O'Neills, Addie and Prey, whatever, what was it? Moses Prey were driving down the road, and of course they're having another fight, and it's over the map, and
that was done in one shot, and we did it 25 times the first day, and we didn't get it once. And we came back a couple of days later, did it 15 more times. We finally got it. I insisted on having it in one shot, which was tricky, because Tatum had a lot of stuff to do. But I figured if we could do that at the end of Act One and get it in one shot, although the audience doesn't notice things like that they feel it, that I thought that it would say, this kid can act, even though a lot of the rest of the performance was manipulated.
From an emotional viewing standpoint, I just noticed when they're going back and forth about the towns they're going to go through, that he fell in love with the characters, of course, because that's her dad, so he obviously loved her, but the character that's when he was falling in love with this girl. That's what, because it's a love story.
It cemented their relationship, yeah.
We'll just keep veering.
I guess we'll just keep veering.
It's hysterical. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. And I will try to eventually do something, another talk with you at some point.
Well, maybe I'll be happy to talk to you anytime.
I appreciate it. I'll be real prepared.
I think you did fine.
Thank you.
Jay can't afford. The Ernest Hemingway of the cinema.
Mr. Hannaford. I just want to know what he represents.
The man is infested with disciples. I'm the apostle.
Just like me and God. How could you tell us apart?
Hannaford's new movie?
The Other Side of the Wind.
What's that about the movie?
We don't talk about the movie.
So you old guys are trying to get with it. Is that what this movie's about?
Well, we don't actually know.
What do we know? Jake is just making it up as he goes along.
He's done it before.
Movies and friendship. Those are mysteries.
Mr. Hannaford, could you please slow down?
Mr. Hannaford!
What he creates, he has to wreck. It's a compulsion.
Want me to bring you another scotch?
We'll have our own movie. A real movie.
the other side of the ring.
Well, here it is. If anybody wants to see it.